three members of the newly formed Black Student Movement. I think I was going to suggest to Dr. Mabizela that we change the slogan of the university from where leaders learn to where learners lead. It might be more appropriate these last meetings. It struck me as the right way around. So we have, in order of speaking, I think Thembani Onceya first, right? Followed by, Thembani is in anthropology year 2, that's right. Yeah. Then followed by Toli, MA Politics. And finally Lihle Ngcobozi, also MA Politics. So we have a surfeit of politics students, 2 out of 3. Now they have 15 minutes each, taking a total of 3/4 of an hour, which will take us exactly to 3 o'clock. And then I'll open it for about half an hour, 3/4 of an hour for discussion. Okay. Okay. Off you go.
Okay. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Yeah. Let me start this by doing a poem that I recited on the day when we launched the movement. It was the poem I used for the introduction of the movement during the first day of our protest meeting. I don't know what was that, but it was something like a protest meeting, yeah. The title of this poem is My Africa Bleeds. As my Africa bleeds at the system feed her with these poisons and drugs, indeed I will feed her with these poetical sweats and see if you will succeed to read beyond the seed ploughed to our creed by our African blood, we all from the African mud. As my Africa bleeds at the system feed her with these poisons and drugs, indeed I will feed her with these poetical sweats and see if you will succeed to read beyond the seed ploughed to our creed by our African blood, we all from the African mud. I indulge in the knowledge of Sankofa, Ubuntu, and Ma'at, like take unto Diop, searching for stories of his identity. I have read the scribes, the tablets and stones, and faced the golden dynasties. My African Africa became my African Africa became my Afrocentric perspective. My Afrocentric perspective will be a nod to your big head. I orchestrate truth in parables and metaphors like Imhotep, giving instruction to the generations of all this time. Know thyself as it was written in every temple in Kemet. Europeans have fooled us and decolonized our minds. They have programmed us and led us to be dumb people who don't understand who they are. They have set us like the people who have been set into journeys of death, like we remember the times of Marikana when their blood bleeds in my African land, in my African tongue. Is this what was planned or what was architectured by people who wanted to see other people down? But with these words I say, my Africa bleeds at the system feed her with these poisons and drugs. Indeed I will feed her with these poetical sweats and see if you will succeed to read beyond the seed ploughed to our creed by our African blood, we all from the African mud. We don't eat no food but we work like we demons. They have programmed us like we are cyborgs. They have fooled us with fashion, television, and racial opportunities. I reject all their calls because there are no effects. I go back to my dashiki, Iswaswa, and Iskaka, to my golden elephant that was found in Mopambube. I take times and seasons to Umazisikas that you call the Adam's calendar. In the great walls of Zimbabwe, I faced the civilization of Bonamataba. I respect nature like calling Mauritius in Nigeria. I come from the Stasuris like the Dogon people of Mali. In the midst of the a good scriber. I have painted stones with about what? Don't you know I am egalitarian? That's for Africa. Before you tell me about what you were told about Africa, read the story of yourself so that you can understand on how we have come into this. What is it that makes us what we are? What is it that possesses the strength of who it is? The time has come into a bleeding senses of what it is. Poverty orchestrated in front of our eyes. Children were being demonized by the settlers and people were marginalized. They were taken down and trapped into the system of death. With these words, I still try to find traces of my footsteps, traces of what it is to be a human being. I exist because I am. I stand for what it is. I will do what it is to make me what it be. Should I be what it is, the poet that scattered in ancient times, the scattered that I come to pick up on these pieces of humanity? I discovered the senses of what it is. I have discovered the humanity within us. I have come with the poetical sounds that will speak into our hearts. As the times go forward, we strengthen ourselves and we move forward. We take our responsibility and challenge the system. As my Africa bleeds, the system feeds her with these poisons and drugs. Indeed, I will feed her with these poetical swords and see if you will succeed to read beyond the seed. Plow to our creed by our African blood. We all from the African mud. Thank you. Out of many challenges, out of many stresses and depressions, out of many frustrations and many things that students have been facing in this institution, they came together. Out of many isolations, out of many self-interest, out of many things that are happening, the students have come together to form an organization that they can use so that they can be able to express their situations and conditions. It is something that we have never seen in this institution for 110 years. It is something that maybe many people will never thought it would happen in this institution. But because of the time and what it is to be a human being, because of many questions inside ourselves, because of many things that we could not express, we have come together to say we are a Black student movement. Because we wanted something that can help us to push our struggles forward. We wanted to take the responsibility of our own lives. And we wanted to take the responsibility of the challenges that other people are facing. That is what it is to be a human being. What makes Biko Biko? What makes Frantz Fanon? Or what was it that was in Biko that makes him him? What was it that made Frantz Fanon? What was Frantz Fanon? Many years have passed. He passed away a long time ago. But up until today, and in many years to come, his name will be remembered. Why? What is it that was in Frantz Fanon that made him him? What was it that was in Stephen Bantu Biko that made him him? What is it that is in us that makes us us? What is it that makes the black student movement a black student movement? These are the questions that reminds me of Frantz Fanon in his prayer. Oh, my body, make me a man who questions everything. Because these questions, they guide you into a self-understanding. And once you are able to shape yourself and construct yourself in a particular way that you will use to engage with the system, you start feeling like, I am living, I am alive. When we started to have meetings inside the tower building here at Rhodes University, after those kinds of meetings that happens in those guerrilla tactics, I have come and reflect into what I do because I was part of that. And I have come to reflect into what the movement is doing. I found out that the movement lives. It started to show itself in an institution that doesn't allow those kinds of strategies that we have been using. The question goes back, what is it that makes this movement a movement? It goes back to what is it that made Biko Biko? Because out of many questions that Stephen Bantu Biko himself questioned himself about what is happening in the world, he came to realize that this is a matter of urgency. We need to engage to this system. We need to fight. Out of those many thoughts, today we speak about the Black Conscious Movement. And out of many thoughts that we have been thinking about, maybe actually agitating in ourselves, because somewhere, somehow, we self-suppress ourselves with kinds of questions because we want to grow. If you don't self-critically look at yourself, it won't be easy for you to understand your particular actions. And this also goes to the questions of morality. Because once you start questioning your humanity, it questions the fact of how do you do things? How do you move forward? So, when Biko speak about the Black Consciousness Movement on the basis of the fact that it was not a matter of a pigmentation of the skin, but the liberation of the mind, he realized that the problem starts in the mind. This is why today you will hear people saying that we are agents of white people. We are hooligans. Those are the strategies that the government has been using in the social movement. The UPM here in Grahamstown have been experiencing those kind of responses from the system. The Abahlali basemjondolo in KZN, they have been experiencing those kind of responses from the same system. And here we are at Rhodes University. We are still experiencing those kind of responses from the system. So how do you separate what is happening here in the institution to what is happening in our societies? How did the Black Consciousness become a social movement instead of being an institutional movement of students? Because that's where it started. It started from the students wanting to engage with the politics of institution. But from there, it rise to communities. They started to build clinics. So I want us today, when we think about the Black student movement, to think about the responsibility that we are asking for. Yeah, because what we have started is something that most of people were not thinking about at this time. Because of our society, if you look into South African society, you found that many people were depoliticized and were dehumanized. They are living in situations that are unacceptable, but they can't speak about those kinds of situations to the responsible people. They speak about those situations in their corners. This is what is happening in the institution. You have students who have problems, who have situations that are unacceptable, but they can't speak because the culture of the institution doesn't allow them. When I talk about the culture of institution, I'm talking about the structural and the class-based and academic suppression. It becomes a suppression once you are unable to engage to the system that you want to learn so that you can get your degree. And you end up not getting that degree because you were not able to learn actually what you wanted to learn. The space was not provided for you because of the language that was used, because of the environment, and because of the class-based kind of society that Rhodes University is. You look at yourself, you internalize those frustrations, those challenges, you keep them to yourself. You found out in September that you can't cope. You are leaving this institution. Here we are talking about the experiences of students in the institution. You have a problem of not having money to go home. You can't speak to anyone because the cultural institution doesn't allow you. It doesn't open that space for other people. Why? Because from the fact of what you see is something that is like wow to you. You come from a underprivileged background. The only people that you know are the people of the township. Suddenly you found yourself in Rhodes University. The class, the structure of the institution, and the language that is used, it suppresses you without even being able to open your mouth. You take those problems and you internalize them. You keep them to yourself. You found out later you collapsed in the institution. And people start now to think about finding your help. And even when they give you that kind of a help, it's only the help that will help you from the problem of fainting, not the problem of what is happening internally to yourself. And that makes me question the fact that in the Black student movement, our idea was to speak to the hearts of the people in the institution. We wanted to take our deeper concerns straight to the heart of the institution and say, deal with it. This is how we feel. Because we tried to find a courage to ourselves that we exist, and we will become. And now we are in the process of becoming.
Let's give Vuyolwethu a chance now.
Okay, molweni nonke. Isibulisele nje basichaziwe igama lami nguVuyo. Yes. Before I begin, I just want to start with a quote that Professor Louis Gordon gave when he was delivering. He was making the opening speech. He was the first person to speak because it was a new launch of the Pan-African Baraza. So they asked him to actually come and talk about Fanon at 90. So because now we're celebrating, it's also the 90th birthday of Frantz Fanon, whom ourselves as the Black Student Movement we have identified. We have taken that philosophy in terms of looking at the world and what are the changes that needs to be happening. So we take people like Abo Steve Biko, Frantz Fanon, Patrice Lumumba, Kwame Nkrumah, and a host of others, or Thomas Sankara, and look in terms of applying that kind of thinking to trying to usher in a new humanity. So I just want to start with that quote there before I start with this issue of roads must change. So basically, he was echoing Frantz Fanon's text titled "A Dying Colonialism." So he was saying here, revolution is truth, and this truth is the oxygen through which you can usher in a new humanity. So what is basically happening with the Black Student Movement, you see? Because we have noticed, we have identified what are the problems as experienced predominantly, you see, by students from Black working class families when they came here. So through this process of the Black Student Movement, what we're trying to do is to actually question and challenge the status quo and say that we have to usher in a new humanity, not just for the student, but if the student body itself in its entirety can be conscientized, and then we still have the same management with the same kind of thinking, basically we are not moving anywhere. So I'll just try to speak first of all to the first demand that we made, because when we met, I think it was last week, basically we organized ourselves, we went to Trostilons, and it was raining like this, but students, you see, out of that, they came, their numbers, to pledge solidarity. Now, because this, let's say, it must be clear that this entire thing started at the UCT. The students basically, they're agitating for the statue of Rhodes, of Cecil John Rhodes to be dismantled, to be crushed, because for them, it's a symbolic racism to have that statue there. Now, I just want to speak to Cecil John Rhodes and give a brief context there. Why, in our view, we feel that the name of the institution have to change. Here, first of all, we're talking about someone who accumulated a lot of wealth through cheap labor, super exploitation as well. And this particular, Doctor did mention this thing when he was addressing us yesterday. Basically, this side here, from, you see, it was the Cape Colony at that time. And himself, I think he was at some point the Prime Minister. And the kind of laws, like if you look at the Glen Grey Act, basically you're removing people from the key areas because you want to accumulate wealth, and thereby you bastardize them through that process. You take the essence, like the human essence, out of them. They are animals in a way. And I think some of his statements, he did mention such a thing. So ourselves, when we looked at the struggles there at UCT, we then, as a collective of students, said, leaders, we have been talking about these things, you see, in our different corners. Myself, I have a lived experience of Rhodes University since 2011. As a child from a Black working class family, I do understand what it means. So, but also, because if we deal with that issue only, it will be a small issue, and we won't be taken serious. Because there's a larger issue here, we're talking of transformation. And I think that was a perfect opportunity also, because as a student, through the depoliticization campaign that the institution itself has, you see, it wants basically, if it is teaching us all these radical things, through not challenging, through not questioning the same structures, it wants us to be armchair radicals at the end of the day. People who are going to get degrees and leave and start working for government agents and all of those things, but without actually engaging in that culture of questioning, you see. So I was just giving some background there. So when we met at Rostilons, we did deliberate on that issue. But then we had an open session whereby I said every student who's here can talk. What are the challenges that the students themselves identify? And there were many things that came out of it. So you see now, if we're in our own corners talking about these struggles, maybe chilling here at Port Gardens, talking about these things, and not allowing it to be an open platform to everyone so that they can come and add their views there, it was going to be a small issue. But the minute we took it to the center there by the Rostilons, you see, even the people of management watching us, and students talked about these things. And some of the issues that popped up there is also the Africanization of curriculum itself. And I'm not sure how many of you are actually part of the Black Student Movement on Facebook. But what Malaika mentioned there is the fact that she approached this office, you see, the international office, and to her shock, only to find out there are only 2 institutions in which us as Rhodes students here in South Africa we can actually embark upon in terms of exchange. So only 2 institutions in Africa, the rest are there. So what does that on its own speak when it comes to the issue of Africanizing the curriculum? And also through that process, we also learned now, as Zion did mention, the issue now of VEC, you say VEC accommodation, for example, and it is a problem for many students. You see, because there are students coming from KZN, coming from Limpopo, from Mpumalanga, from the Western Cape, whose parents actually can't be able to pay for the student to come back home in a week's time and also to go back to Rhodes. And these issues, we have the NSRC. I'm not sure whether one of them is here, because I think it was important that one of them is actually here, but it's fine. Maybe they are busy. But you see, but basically, these things have been happening for many years, and that depoliticization culture that has been normalized. You see, actually now the SRC itself are not challenging these issues. Once you get to Rhodes, the only first thing that we hear about as a student, we're told about the Great Field Party and all the serenades and all of those things. Whom in themselves, those serenades, those spaces there, students find it very difficult to access, you know. And we talk about another thing now is the issue of lectures, you see. Because some of us, you know, we are not very good in terms of articulating ourselves in English purely, you see, because of, you have to understand that these things have to do with cultural capital as well. Where are you coming from? Which school did you go to? Where you socialized and all of that, your background. Now, that background then also dictates your positioning in the institution. So, you see, there's a number of issues. All of those issues, we raised them on that day. And now the key thing that came up was to how are we going to keep the spirit going? And how are we going to make sure that what we have now, we communicate it, and it must be a matter of national discourse. You see, because at UCT it is happening. That is when we then said we have to come up now with strategies and tactics in terms of what is it that we are going to do, and in that we must also incorporate, you know. Sorry, Lihle, what? Okay, in that process, you know, we must also incorporate the key aims and objectives that. The ultimate objective that we want to achieve. So basically, after that meeting, I mean, students did deliberate and said that, look, we must be practical. We must not be abstract and deal with issues of name change only. There are other things there on the ground. For example, we took that campaign seriously, and the students themselves freely. And this organization, the Black Student Movement, I've been asked by people many times, like on Facebook and sites, saying, who is the founder of this movement? Who is the leader? Why is it a leaderless organization? I say, look, for yourself, you are asking that question. You have to come to the theater of a struggle. Yes. So that, because this is the theater. Because now, this Black Student is a theater of struggle. And we are also in a process of educating, you see, the outlooks of students in general, but also the SRC itself. Because we feel that that structure of the SRC has been bureaucratized, and basically the institutional culture of Rhodes themselves, they don't find it. I was shocked that for quite some time they did not find it problematic whatsoever. So to those students, I just want to make it clear, this organization is still maintained, is keeping this culture of it as a leaderless organization, because we have, you know, bad history of organizations or movements. Basically, the minute that now, I think Fanon was talking to this issue on the wretched of the earth. I think it's the 4th chapter there. He did deliberate on these things that the minute. Thank you. So basically, I think it's I'm not sure how much time I think.
5 more minutes.
Okay.
5 more minutes.
I think basically it's that 4th chapter, the pitfalls of national consciousness. That's basically saying that the minute we have the educated, perhaps elite or so, and then the minute you break the practical links between them and between these elites, the so-called elites, and the mass of the people, what will happen after that? We will have tragic mishaps. And I think in South Africa, it is befitting to talk about this because in 1994, this is what has happened. Now, as this small Black student movement, as you see us here, what we are doing in the institution it has a potential, you see, of reaching the entire country. And I want to thank also the media as well in this project. It was because some section of the media has welcomed our agenda. We've been given an opportunity. Some comrades from us have been writing, they're using platforms, some have been speaking to TV, some have been also articulating in radio. So that is why we are saying that this is the truth that we're embarking upon. And it is an oxygen that is there, through which now we can usher in that new humanity. And basically for the institution itself, we want them to take us serious, the management, even at the level of council, because this thing did come up in 1994, when the country was dealing with decolonization. That, look man, we still have these symbols in other parts of the country. Why are we only changing certain things? The institution, this particular topic of name change was dealt with there, saying, we can't talk about that, And so now, even, I'm sure that the stance with regards to the management is still that we cannot necessarily change the name. But what we are saying is that we have a very clear agenda. And this thing is not going to die. We're not saying, this is not something, I saw talk to the registrar, they're trying to come there and just say, no, you see, we can resolve it quickly.
Yeah.
It's a long process. What we're aiming for, when we're talking about transformation, the complete overhaul of the institutional culture, we're basically talking about transformation to the depth of the concept itself.
Exactly.
So we want the culture itself to be changed of the institution. And also the management in terms of dealing with students, also it must change. So basically leaders, I don't have any thing to say more than that, but I was trying to perhaps sensitize people to our strategies and tactics and what has been our modus operandi since we were formed. So that is how we operate, and in terms of responses, other companies will talk about those issues. But I just wanted to actually talk about those things, and we are very much open. This is the fact that it's a black student movement. People think that it is now excluding certain people. No, you have to go back. I won't exhaust much energy to that, but you have to go back and read the people's literature. What was the idea behind them launching a black consciousness movement? It was not basically to say that no, we are excluding, but we are trying in the process to usher in a humanity, and as Zion said, at the level of consciousness as well. You see. So I think leaders, with those words, I'm not sure, but I'll just stand there.
Thank you very much, Vuyo. Please welcome Lihle now.
I just want to talk about the responses that we've had as a Black Student Movement, and then also try to draw on. Yes, please. Speak louder. Okay. I just want to draw on the responses that we've received as a movement, and also possibly draw on some symbolisms and what it means, and sort of connect everything that's happening to sort of national discourse on race and transformation in South Africa. Just because I think that it's important to not isolate these things in pockets, but to also just be mindful of how they connect to the greater picture. But first, I just want to start by saying that as a Black, queer woman in this institution, I've had a lot of issues. I've been here since 2010. And, people think that this thing just came yesterday, and that these issues, just sprung up because we've got FOMO and UCT is doing something and we're not. So let's do something. Fear of missing out, sorry, that's what FOMO is. That we've got FOMO, and so we're just jumping on the bandwagon because we have nothing else to do in this purple island of ours. But people need to know that these conversations have been going on for a while, and also because some students don't feel that they've had the space to express and articulate their experiences. And because now the Black Student Movement has provided this space of safety and protection, students are now able to come with their experiences, and they're able to say, actually, this is what happened to me, and my most recent experience, before I go into the responses, is that after we had met on the Drosty Lawns on the Thursday, I went back to where I get my money from. And one of the people there had said that they wanted to start a tutoring program with people in the location, and you know, they want to help them out. And then the person then said, but Lihle, you can't because you have a white accent. And the people, and those people won't be able to hear you, they won't be able to understand. But you, with the other guy that was standing next to me, you've got an accent that they can understand. So you are more fitting in that space than Lihle, who is assumed to come from a certain place. He did not even engage the fact that I was raised by my grandmother, I'm from a working class background, that this accent was worked for. It's not something that just came up overnight. And you know, the fact that he assumes that people over there can only understand a certain language, a certain accent, because it's associated to a certain type of thinking. You know, and those are the kind of things that we're dealing with as black students in the institution. Those are the microaggressions that people don't understand. And when they say, oh, you speak so well, they don't understand that this accent was worked for. It's not something that just came up. This accent in itself, it just shows the struggle that our parents had to go through in order for us to be able to speak a language which allows us to access certain things, that allows us recognition in some sense, that allows us to be taken seriously, that allows us to be seen. And so when we think about these things, we actually need to think about it holistically and not think about it in isolation. But just to speak about the responses then that we've had, firstly, we've had, you know, you're racist, you're the Taliban, you're terrorists. And the thing that strikes me is that these are the sort of tropes that were used in the colony, right? In the colonial time, during when your people were fighting in the struggle, these are the sort of identifiable markers that were used to delegitimize the experiences and concerns of our people back then. And you see that those, because we haven't broken from the colony and the post, there hasn't been a substantial shift in those two time zones. The languages have been imported into this time. And so these ways of speaking and identifying people have been carried into this new space. And so it shouldn't be surprising when people say that you're a racist, you're a terrorist, because we haven't shifted from the modes of thinking and more specifically, whiteness itself hasn't shifted from its mode of thinking from the colony into the post-colony, or from the colony into post-apartheid era. And so when people bring up these things, we also need to be mindful of the fact that these things are easily accessible to them. They're easy to say them. It's easy for them to say these things because they have constant access to them. They're constantly speaking in these languages, whether in private, in their small circles, or whether in the public sphere. And so as a black student movement ourselves, we also need to be mindful of the fact that we will be called these things because there has been no decisive shift or break in the way in which whiteness operates, not just at Rhodes, but also on a national level and also internationally. And so also, because the black student movement is on a project of constituting the South, we also need to be mindful of the fact that some people's consciousness is behind. They haven't caught up yet, you know? Their consciousness is still stuck in that time. And so when you as a black person or somebody whose relation to white power is one that is quite, meager, you need to constantly engage in a project of constituting the South, because at every point, whiteness is going to try to derail you, it's going to try to other you, it's going to try and make that project something that is not worthy of doing. And so, as a student movement, we need to really be aware of that project of constituting the South, because it's not really just about transformation, it's also about claiming your identity back. It's about also understanding that it's more than the name, It's more than curriculum transformation, it's more than the statue falling. It's a greater project that was started by our forefathers and our foremothers in claiming the black identity and constantly constituting it, because as a black person, your identity constantly needs to be substantiated and to constantly constituted because people are going to try to take it away from you. And so as a Black student movement, that's what we're doing. And also, just another thing, yesterday at the launch with Raymond Satner, Dr. Nomalanga Peter, spoke about the warrior citizen or whatever, or the sort of liberation language that the Black student movement is using. And for me, I mean, not that she was dismissing it, I don't want to say that, but she was saying that we need to sort of find new ways to make ourselves relevant within this time. And for me, because the way I'm understanding what's happening now is because that Rhodes is still in the colony, right? We are still the colony.
Yes.
And so it's necessary to be the warrior in this context, right?
Yes.
It's necessary to be radical. It's necessary to fight. It's necessary then to use the language of the liberation struggle because we're in the colony. But at the same time, we also have our foot in the post-colony. So we're straddling these two lines, and so our responses also have to be mindful of those two dimensions that we're straddling at the same time. And it's difficult because how do you what language do we have that's able to articulate and express these things that does not carry sort of this liberation rhetoric that is, associated with the warrior? So how do we sort of, as the Black student movement, how do we do that? And how do we do that in a way that, doesn't conform, yes. Because, that is one thing for me that is really troubling because I don't know how to straddle those lines. I don't know how to be in the colony and the post-colony at the same time. And what that means for us as the Black student movement. Also, the securitization that we faced from the institution, particularly white masculinity, particularly Dr. Fari. Also, when the SRC then calls upon the state to intervene, it's, for me, it's troubling because it also makes sense because that's what happened to Winnie Madikizela. That's what happened to Asata Shakur. That's what happened to Angela Davis. When they were in the project of the humanization of the Self, they were sanctioned. You're right? They were put on the FBI list. Some people were put into solitary confinement for so many days. And that is all the workings of the colony. And we should not be surprised when these things happen because we are in the colony. But we are expected to act as if we're in the post-colony. And so when we deviate from being in the colony, it's, these people are radical. These people, where do they come from? And for me, I just don't. The securitization for me is because it then also says who has the right to occupy the space. Yes. It says who has the right then to lay a claim to Rhodes being a home. Who has the right to have access to Rhodes as a space of safety and security. Because if you're being criminalized for constituting the self, what and which self are they protecting when they criminalize these other bodies? Which bodies are important on this campus? Which ideologies are protected?
Yes.
What forms of thinking and being are preferred? So when we think about being, criminalized and these security forces that just make way, because now we just see them everywhere. We see these blue-collared men running around everywhere when it wasn't like that a week ago or a week or two ago. So what does that say about the danger of the black body in this institution? Because that's what they're saying to us, right? So that for me is one of the most not surprising, but troubling things, because it's not just silencing, but it's just saying, actually, stop that project because it doesn't make sense in this space. That's what it's saying to us. And so as the Black student movement, we really need to be serious about this project, because it's more than just the name. It's more than just curriculum transformation. Of course, those things are very important and they speak to the project of the movement, but at the core, it's about claiming the self in this institution. And I don't know how much longer I have left. 5 minutes. And also, also I just want to note the differences in responses from Dr. Sizwe and Dr. Fourie. Because when Dr. Mabizela, saw us on Wednesday, to respond to our memorandum, there was no threat. He didn't feel threatened. He didn't feel that, these people are here to, what's this word? To destroy the sacred building, as Dr. Fourie had said. He spoke to us and engaged with us and listened to our concern. But then, when it comes to Dr. Fourie and the letter from Alumni House, then you get to see, what people really think, and for me, that letter, for me, was the most problematic thing that has ever come out of the institution, that we're a racist storm, and that we're inciting violence and all of those things. And I just want somebody to tell me what violence has ensued since we've started. What sort of violence has happened? I don't know if it's violence to express your concerns as a human being. Maybe that's being violent, and if it is, then color me it, and so I just really, like Dr. Aubrey said yesterday, it's a quantum leap that we're on. People's consciousnesses, if that's a word, are far behind, some of them. They're not on track with what's happening. Some people miss the revolution. They do, because they're too busy protecting other things that, and protecting and holding on to this identity that is in itself so fragile, because I've never seen something so fragile as whiteness, yet so resistant at the same time. But it's a quantum leap what we're doing. It really is. And we need to, that's all I'm going to say, we just need to keep going, because as I said yesterday, this thing is fragile. It can break at any moment. It can literally just stop. We can wake up tomorrow and everybody's like, I'm out. But we really need to protect it, because it speaks to just the greater things of transformation, not just at Rhodes and UCT, but just in South Africa. So I really, really am proud to be part of this. So,
As you were speaking, I was reminded of the fact that the terrorist is always the other. It's never power which engages in terror. The power always has defense forces. It defends itself. And the terrorist is always the other. Never mind. That's just a thought in passing.